Alex Answer here. It is July 11th, 2017, doing a video outside because it feels like the right moment to do so. So it's really about the way of the spiritual warrior rather than the path of the revolutionary. That's what I've always been interested in. I found one of Dan Millman's book, The Way of the Spiritual Warrior, years ago. This is another one called Everyday Enlightenment. I made reference to the Plato's Republic in the past, so have others. So I haven't read this whole book yet, but I opened up the book to a random spot about a week ago and made reference to it in a video. So we're going to start here. In his Republic, Plato describes a group of people living within a dark cavern far from the light of day, seen only in their shadows cast by firelight upon the walls. These dark shapes are only in their reality because they have not ventured outside the cave. Indeed, they are unaware that there is an outside. Plato's allegory of the cave goes on to describe how someone escapes from the cave into the sunlight of the real world. Having seen the light, he returns to the cave and tries without success to tell the others in prison there about the real world outside. His words make no sense to anyone but a few adventurous souls who dare to venture with him upward into the unknown towards a brighter, shining reality. We are each living within the caves of our dimmed and distorted perceptions, seeing not the world but our own minds. Tame your mind shows how to grasp reality as it is, beyond the shadow play of thought. Reality is not what you think. So we're going to start there because a lot of people have been programmed to believe in a particular reality. They use certain words to describe a limited understanding, ethnocentric behavior. And there's a lot of suspicion towards people that are on the spiritual path that speak about the greater situation that we're in. And it's not an easy time in day and age to speak of certain things and be a political independent. But I find these things worthy of bringing up. I see a lot of people lost in the anger in the left right. Actually, I was talking with a friend of mine. He was having a similar experience as I. He was discussing trying to stay away from YouTube videos, protest videos, because of all the anger that we're seeing from both sides and how ridiculous it is. And we're in absolute agreement on that fact. And I also, there's going to be video of that uploaded later. I had a visitor recently. He's a former Ron Paul delegate back in 2012. So we've been friends since then, and he came up from Dallas. I'm going to be uploading that footage later. And there's a lot of things that this gentleman does not agree with me on, but he finds a lot of my ideas interesting. And he described some of the stuff that I do as that of an artist, not necessarily that of a reporter or journalist or one to be held to the same standards. And I don't normally come across people that are able to see me outside the box in this content in that way. So that was definitely cool. It was good to see John, and I'm looking forward to future off-grid projects, building some things in the future. I'm going to pause now and again read from Ansari Selected Poems. Now, this was written by an ancestor or a distant relative at the very least at the 11th century. From the unmanifest I came and pitched my tent in the forest of material existence. I passed through mineral and vegetable kingdoms. Then my mind carried me into the animal kingdom. Having reached there, I crossed beyond it. Then the crystal clear shell of the human heart, I nursed the drop of self into a pearl. And in association with good men, I wandered round that prayer house. And having experienced that, crossed beyond that, I looked to the road that leads to God. And I became a slave at God's gate. Then the duality of all disappeared, and I became absorbed in that one. And I read that a little bit quickly. And the reason I bring it up is because I think that's one of the best poems that he's ever written. And it reminds me of Taoism. There's a couple other books here that I purchased that I'm going to show, making reference to the need to write more. Try to get outside my own head and thinking about world events. Sometimes it would be better to read a book than watch a movie. Just a couple things here from thriftbooks.com. So the mass tom cost of these 4 books was about $22. So first we have Solar Rain, taking my attention to the sun because I'm going to be publishing the 100-page PDF, what I put together in 2013, but I haven't yet just put on the web. I'm going to publish what I already put together, perhaps add in some footnotes. I already have 250 slides that I have somewhere else online, but it's not on my own website. I've just been living the off grid experience and I haven't been able to do all of the administrative stuff. Then I need to catalog my own content that I've already created, generated, in particular, written. So it's important that I get that done. Other things for inspiration here is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas from Hunter S. Thompson. The man certainly has a way with words. And even though I've never done anything like what he has done to that extent, I think there's a parallel, I think, between someone that has having expanded consciousness and walks through the bars, so to speak, of life to see the, if you will, archons of this world, as Johnny Depp in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas walks into that bar at Circus Circus, and all of the patrons inside that bar appear to be reptilian screwy. Keep my voice down. And so there's definitely a parallel in reality at times seeming a little bit different than what it really is. We were somewhere around Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive. And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and driving around the car. And that goes on to that famous T-shirt as well. We can't stop here. This is Bat Country, or that famous quote from the movie. I'm not going to read anymore. But in thinking about my life and what I'll be writing with regards to that, uh, things like this are a little bit more inspiring to me than any conspiracy theory book, which in many cases is devoid in color with regards to the story. You know, there's a lot of people with their theories out there, but not as much of a real sharing with regards to their upbringing, their early spiritual experiences, how they came to their awareness regarding certain things. I see a lot of people. It's mosquito season. You have the peak of summer. I see a lot of people regurgitating the same talking points without really writing about their lives, really the people behind the ideas, and to do it from an honest perspective, not the mainstream media doing a hit piece on an individual, for example, but a real honest sharing of how someone came to their own understanding and how that in and of itself is the way of the spiritual warrior, like 100th Monkey, where people start realizing things around the world regarding their governments, regarding health, regarding free energy, regarding their connection to spirit, regarding the science of the sun and everything that we're learning about how the sun impacts our reality here. So it's a quickening. We are in a quickening of knowledge and information. And that is one of the positive things about this reality that we live in despite the threats of war. Here is West of Kabul, East of New York by Tamim Ansari, cousin of my father. And he talks about the migration in the 60s. Coming from a white mother and an Afghan father, and being one of the few that I know of who is an author, and he happens to share the same surname. And you can find work by him online. Disclaimer, Tamim Ansari does not approve of any of this content, nor do any other Ansaris, and so they have stayed away from me and this content. But I will every now and then refer to their work because he tells a good story about his experience. And he's not a Muslim. I don't believe he is a Muslim, but he is respected by their Ansaris because he's an author. And because there's aspects of his stories that needed to be told. Born to an Afghan father and American mother, Timmy Mansouri grew up in the intimate world of Afghan family life, immigrated to San Francisco thinking he left Afghan culture behind forever. At the height of the Iranian Revolution, he took a scary journey through the Islamic world. He went on trip and he saw things that frightened him. And after 9/11, he became very famous for an article that was published by Willamette Week and others discussing Osama bin Laden's parallel to Hitler, and to not confuse Osama bin Laden with the Afghans, for he was an outsider. And to bomb Afghanistan back to the Stone Age would be to do something that has already been done, because it has already been, and it was already bombed back to the Stone Age. And then we have this book, Unrestricted Warfare, and this actually discusses China using Osama and radical terrorism to create a wedge against the West. So it's a very important read in light of all the concerns about China and the growth. Going back to this book, Introduction to Gnosis, and this was, believe it or not, given to me by somebody about 10 years ago or 15 years ago in Portland, Oregon, that watched my show, that met me at the park. It was 2008. It was Laurelhurst Park, right off 39th and Belmont. And she asked me at the time, this is a good place to close. I'm going to pick some random things from here, some things for you to think about. Way of the Spiritual Warrior, finding the gnosis, the knowledge within yourself through this self-awareness and finding it within, not without. And so I didn't really follow up on it yet and still wasn't familiar with the term the archons. It wasn't until 2012 when I was living in Dallas, quite the archon city, that I learned about the archons. But I always feel like I was on the Gnostic path, the spiritual path, looking beyond politics and religion at why society is the way that it is. And that's ultimately what motivated me to go off grid, because I see way too many people in mainstream society that are affected by the programming, affected by the violence, affected by the politics, affected by the classism, and so on and so forth. And after, say, the first 31 years of living within those realities, of course, I was lucky to live on 40 acres, and I'll write more about that later. So, as we find some areas here in this book that, ironically, after all these years, I've never lost. As the sun comes back out, as we're at about 90 degrees, 91 degrees, this is what I wanted to mention, and I'm going to keep this simple. But I've said before, we're transmitter receivers. And there's an image here of what looks like fields around the heads. And also with the internet, when people are thinking about each other or obsessing on each other or sending love across the internet, thinking strongly about someone, and someone else is on the internet at the same time, there's an actual psychic linkage and connection, especially for those that are sensitive. So let's go ahead, because there's so many potential positive repercussions for this knowledge and using it in a mindful way, not just being affected by the internet and certain news that we don't want to see or realities that bother us and make us sad, because it's not good to be stuck in that vibration. We also have to be in our power, and the internet can kind of skew reality to where the real value systems aren't emphasized. It's about likes, it's about status within the internet sphere, and it's really a matrix. So let's go ahead and cover this. It is necessary for you to know that a immensely superior power greater than electricity and dynamite exists. That is the power of the mind. When you think of a friend or a member of the family, mental waves escape from your brain. And as I read this, think about how can we use our mental waves for good and not pipe dreams. Oh, a collective shift in reality. I'm just going to leave that up to you to ponder the mindful use of the mental waves, as I am as well. Because if we're not aware of this, that we have these abilities, and we're misdirected by the mind control and taught to dislike each other and not focus on something higher, uh, then why is it difficult to see why so many people have been misled? Because it's like they haven't mindfully used their tools in the way that they were meant to be used. So either we use the tools mindfully or they'll be used against us. And the mind is a powerful tool. These waves are similar to those of a radio transmitter. These waves travel through space and reach the mind of the person you are thinking about. Scientists have already begun to experiment with the power of the mind. Soon and he uses a word here that I haven't necessarily heard, but I'm sure that there is, because it's probably written in the 70s or 80s. Telemetameter will be invented. Soon it will be invented. An instrument with which the mental forces of each person will be measured. Now, if you look up and find the PDF for Burl Payne's spin force, he did a few experiments in his backyard regarding kind of like the head having its own aura field that causes metal pyramid thing dangling by a string to spin in one direction or another. Burl Payne, the spin force. You can find the PDF free online. Sounds like that. In the future, optics will advance some more, and then the photo mentimeter will be invented, an instrument that will allow us to see and measure the mental force that is rated by the human brain. What we do know is that the government's been involved in projects and including remote viewing, non-local awareness, and that would include telekinesis and moving objects. I don't think that's a far stretch. I think that there are things like that that are possible in our matrix. Absolutely. We don't all have those abilities cultivated, but they're there in some. So we talk about the dark side of our government. There's a misuse of energy that could be used in a more mindful way, and that includes knowledge of the sun. You must know that just as man has a mind, and the entire universe also has a mind, the human mind and the cosmic mind exist. The earth is condensed mind, the entire universe is condensed mind. Universal mind wave saturated the infinite space. And I saw a lot of people posting this week, is the universe conscious? And there was actually a picture of the universe or somewhere, some galaxy, and it looked just like an eye. And that is really, really interesting as we think about the universe within. I really could keep going, but I'm just going to leave it at that and come back with more. Alex Ansary signing off for, I believe it is July 11th, 2017.